And you'll see what we're attempting tomorrow. I think you'll find it interesting. It's a new show for us. It's about beyond ad tech, and the watchword of the future is marketing tech. I'm actually kind of interested to see it myself. Then on Thursday, we're doing OMA Video, which is really focusing on social video. So you might want to think about putting that on your schedule for the week. There's more content and more carefully developed, well-curated content by our editors here in this room the next 3 days than you'll find anywhere else in Internet Week this week. So be sure to come on back. So this show is part of something we're calling the Programmatic Roadshow. Again, I'm just sort of blowing our horn up here, but no company has done more coverage of, both in our publishing outlets and also in our shows, the world of programmatic than MediaPost, starting actually with the forerunners of today's scientific advertising, behavioral targeting, back in what year? 2007. So we've been covering that all along since then, and we covered every day in Real Time Daily. And we have something we're putting on around the country this year, which we call the Programmatic Roadshow. You know, other organizations will do one show and say, hey, that's it. But we're actually doing we started in San Francisco and Boston in April, and we're going on, of course, this week with this show. And then, just to read off the future shows, we have TV Insider Summit in June, which in Amelia Island, Florida. Beautiful place. It's a 3-day show. Be all about programmatic comes to TV. I think those of you involved in that aspect of this phenomenon will want to be there. And then we go on with our Programmatic Insider Summit, all things programmatic, all sectors, which we've been doing for a number of years now. This summer we're at Tahoe, Lake Tahoe in August, also a great place. So, I mean, there are reasons to come to our shows beyond the great content, because we go to great places with these summits. And then we continue at Advertising Week. In last week of September, we're doing OMA Programmatic at Advertising Week, a repeat of this show, but it'll be, of course, fresh material, because we we cover continually, we program anew continually. So you wouldn't be duplicating things if you came to OMA Programmatic at Advertising Week. We're also doing something we call OMA Reckoning, which is really all about ad blocking and the reaction that's been caused by ad tech and programmatic, and people not wanting to be imposed upon in their internet web surfing life, if you can even say that anymore. Do you say that anymore? Web surfing? Okay. I'm from the old school. So then we go on with OMA Chicago and OMA Denver in November, also with a key focus on all these trends and themes: programmatic, the reckoning, the move toward TV. And so you might, if you happen to want to go to Chicago or Denver in November, which is like kind of a big ask, you might want to put that on your list. So I just want to thank our sponsors for today, Digital Trends and Exchange Labs. Thanks for your support. We appreciate it. And they are with us as we go around the country with our Programmatic Roadshow, so thanks to them. And introduce the programmer of this show, and actually the guru behind all our shows, if that's a fair term. And you all have seen him many times before, but he never wears out. Steve Smith.
I love the qualification at the end. That little doesn't wear out, but he's weary, but he doesn't wear out. Welcome everybody. Thank you for coming. As Ken said, we really started these with the OMA Behavioral Show back in 2007, and then the following year did OMA RTB. And in all of those years, back then, we used to measure this stuff in single digits. Remember the days when we used to talk about 5, 7, 8, 9% of online spend was going through programmatic and automated systems? Now the numbers game almost seems irrelevant. I mean, at the latest count, the latest survey of marketers showed that 85% of them are buying programmatic, and we're seeing 6.6 billion going through programmatic just display in the last year, and that's a growth of 9% according to eMarketer. But what's really important here is it's not just the numbers. The ways in which programmatic has been more of a mind shift than even just a dollar shift. The ways in which it's changed the balance of power and the set of issues that have come up in these last 6-7 years that we've been covering it. I mean, just in the last couple of years, I've heard marketers talk and admit that that as a result of the shift towards video and towards mobile programmatic, the traditional display market is becoming less and less interesting to them. And just this last year, we went past the tipping point. The majority of programmatic spend is now going on mobile. And that raised a whole set of new issues about cross-platform ROI and measurement. And that itself changed the balance of power, because then we started seeing platforms like Google, Facebook, Twitter start really becoming that much more powerful because of their ability to deterministically track those people across platforms. We saw traditional media coming under serious pressure because they were competing so directly against these mammoth platforms that were coming into the market at such an incredible advantage. So the technology was moving. This was more than simply spending on this upward trajectory. This was really a shift in the ways in which the market was behaving and the set of issues and problems that were coming up. And as brands are starting now to invest increasingly in programmatic video. We'll hear some of that today, and especially with an eye towards programmatic TV, this longer ball idea that ultimately all media buying is going to happen through automated systems. So we've seen in the last few years programmatic really begin a process where we saw a shift in power, but also new gaps in knowledge over ROI, being able to track people across platforms. These are some of the things that we're going to be taking up today, including raising the issue of trust and the ways in which it sort of exacerbated implicit fears that had always been in the market about trust between client and agency and the ad tech stack, and ultimately even all of these players and consumers themselves. And that's what's fascinating about this, is watching the ways in which a lot of these issues have come up and evolved, the ways in which the simple application of technology and automation 7-8 years ago and targeting really created this evolving and much more complex ecosystem, not just complex technically, but complex in a lot of different ways when it came to market forces. When we started this 6-7 years ago, we would put publishers up here who would openly deny that they were involved in programmatic at all. That's how scared many major media were of programmatic systems. Now, in this show, which we've structured as both buy side and sell side, we have major media who have been able to take hold of these technologies, especially things like header bidding, private exchanges, application of first-party data, and have now finally been able to take hold and regain some advantage in the market. We've seen a shift just in the last couple of years where publishers are no longer working at such an incredible disadvantage, but now are actually starting to assert things like scarcity again into the market, getting a true value, getting a better understanding of the true value of their inventory. We're going to be discussing a lot of that today, but we're going to start with yet another force that's come into the market just in the last year. Consumers asserting themselves. Consumers asserting themselves in the form of denying advertising itself, and that force of ad blocking, which everybody's been talking about in the last year. And we want to start by talking about the ways in which it's impacting the marketplace, the ways in which programmatic has perhaps not only been its cause, but may in fact also be its solution. To take up this question, we would like to welcome Belinda Smith, who's the Director of Programmatic Strategy at 360i, and her panel. Belinda oversees all of the accounts and client teams at the IAB for a number of years as the Director of Industry Initiatives, taking the charge of programs like the Mobile Location Data Working Group and the Future of the Cookie Initiative. Please welcome Belinda and our first panel.
right, good morning, everyone. Thanks for having us and being the wonderful first panel. So, as Steve said, we are here to talk about the newest trending topic and buzzword on ad blocking. So I think, a lot of us, or hopefully most of you, have read the Adobe PageFair report with all of the stats on ad blocking. I'm going to read a couple bullets from that. So 198 million global ad block users, 45 million of those are in the US. Ad block use grew by 48% in the US last year. And the report estimates that ad blocking is costing publishers around $22 billion last year, so 2015. So I want to open the panel with really just giving everyone one sentence to tell me what your ad blocking solution is. So we'll start with Jesse.
Is this on? So I guess my one sentence would probably be build a time machine. I don't really think that there is a one-stop shop solution to this. It's a patchwork of solutions. It's about being a good actor as an advertiser, as a client, and avoiding frequency, invasive formats, and using intelligent data to apply to your targeting.
All right, great. That was more than one sentence.
Sorry.
So, Steve, can you do the one sentence challenge?
I'll try. So my one sentence would be, buy a 100% viewable ad, viewable by humans, and that's one way to avoid paying for ads that are being blocked.
All right, Alejandro.
Hi. I think it's about fixing the economics of content creation.
Interesting. Okay. All right, we'll dive more into that. And last but not least, Brian.
So I think it's a couple-fold. I think we touched on the data and creative piece, make it much more relevant to the consumer. But I think on the flip side of that, I think there needs to be a greater level of accountability on the publisher side. I think there is such pressure and such a need to drive revenue at whatever cost. I think that's propagated a lot of the situation that we're in today of why consumers feel there's a need to block ads, because the ad experiences, frankly, are horrible.
Fair.
I think I'm the only one who did one sentence.
We'll give you,
Steve, you are the
points
winner.
for this round.
Alejandro had one sentence too, though. Okay. So I can't help but notice that in his opening, Steve blamed this on programmatic. But one of the early rallying cries around programmatic was, we're going to use data to make ads more informed. We're going to show people messaging or advertising about things that they actually care about and make the internet more relevant. So we've done that programmatically, but people are blocking ads. So was that thesis wrong? Did we fail?
I don't think this is not about the tactic or the medium of programmatic. I mean, ad block, programmatic done right, or running ads in any traditional space done right, are ads that people are going to want to see, and they're going to be relevant, and creating that dialogue with the consumer will make them not being blocked. So I don't think this is about the tactic of programmatic. This is about an industry that created bad ads, stacked them up, ate up your mobile data plans because they were, making them data heavy when they loaded, and created an environment where consumers wanted to say enough. That's not because of programmatic.
I think that programmatic gets the rap for what you said, data heavy, right? So programmatic has been this wonderful enabler of bringing all of this data to the ecosystem to make ads more relevant and addressable. So perhaps while the mechanism isn't necessarily apparent to the consumer, and that doesn't factor in what they block, what you said about data usage and slow load times, is that on programmatic?
I mean, the data usage, the data that I'm talking about from a programmatic standpoint is really about targeting. It's just about getting to the right person at that right time. What's happening with the ads, and the reason why ads are creating heavy, load tides on phones, is because of the content that people are throwing in them, the video, and the heaviness that's happening around that. It's not about what programmatic is about. It's about the right targeting.
Okay.
So I think that, yeah, it's not programmatic's fault necessarily, but I think that what happened in my mind is that programmatic makes it a lot easier for sort of the bad behaviors of digital to become something that is much more pervasive and feels a lot more onerous to users. So to me, I think that programmatic allows you to, and this happened in pockets certainly before, but I think programmatic amplifies all these trends where you create a remarketing list of people who you know and you hammer them incessantly with no regard for frequency. And you use sort of weak data from third-party vendors that maybe doesn't actually signify intent, and so where you think that you're being relevant, you're actually being irrelevant. And even trusting third-party data to always be a one-to-one match, I feel is a bridge too far in my mind. But it feels like that's accelerated all those things. And then I think the other thing that's happened is that programmatic has pushed pricing down, and rather than sort of seeking to buy the same level of exposure frequency that we did in a world that was pre-programmatic, we've used the same budget and we've just bought a lot more impressions.
Gotcha.
So that oversaturation,
Yeah.
I think, becomes
So
exacerbated.
bad practices enabled or
Completely.
magnified by
Yeah,
programmatic.
and I think that's exactly the case. I think you hit the nail on the head. I think it's just because of automation, it's made it easier to buy. So that's why you see it
Okay.
with far greater prevalence. And I think on the flip side of that, yes, whether we use data poorly or well, and I think we're seeing cases where we do both, the creative payoff does not necessarily match. There's a tremendous mismatch, in fact.
Okay.
I think what we have spent a tremendous amount of time doing, which is how to match that right consumer with the right piece of content or at the right moment of intent with a less than desirable payoff creatively. And that, I think, has driven a lot of this notion of annoyance and how do we get rid of this stuff.
Gotcha.
Stuff being ads.
I agree with my colleagues. I think like another piece of the narrative is that programmatic exposed the fact that there was a lot more supply out there than we thought back when we were buying direct to site. And
point.
that's what pushes prices down. And I think we sort of spiraled into this dynamic where instead of making generous margins on a relatively small amount of inventory, we have to squeeze very, very small margins from lots and lots of, inventory, right? It depends on how you define inventory. That's why we see all these problems, right? Publishers trying to monetize their sites with every available widget. I think that all this comes from just the enormity of supply that's out there.
Okay, that's a good point. So that's also a good segue because I want to quickly talk about the IAB's Lean initiative. So I'm not sure how many in the audience are familiar, but just to recap. So Lean stands for Light Encrypted, Ad Choice Supported, and Non-Invasive. So I want to ask the panel your thoughts. Do you think a new standard or a Lean initiative led by an industry group such as the IAB really gets to the heart of the problem, addresses the issue?
Well, I want to just ask folks in this room how many folks are familiar with Lean. I don't know if anybody raised their hand. So a couple for those who are watching the
We've
video
got three out
at
there.
home. So, that case in point, we live and breathe this stuff, and folks aren't aware of that initiative. And I would even argue that, I don't know the last time I heard ad choices brought up. And from a consumer adoption
point.
standpoint, that never took off, and there was confusion over what that was and what it did from a consumer standpoint. So while I think it's admirable that we continue to pursue new options to be able to improve the consumer experience, I think that I'm not sure that this one is going to be particularly effective. I think that, while light ads, and I get Steve's point, I think one of the great things that TV still does well, and most of the ad spending in our industry is still in TV, although digital will surpass it next year, is sight, sound, and motion. And this incredibly rich, compelling consumer experience that will drive consumers to shelf. And we need those rich, engaging experiences online. Whether they have to be heavy or not, debatable. But I think there's ways to be able to do it in a compelling environment that is certainly mindful to the consumer, but I think there's a little bit of a trade-off. You go too light, and there's no value to the consumer experience when you do that. So I think there's ways to get around it.
Yeah, that's a good point, and that was my next follow-up question. If light means less data, or if light means that it's not rich or not engaging, is that even something we're interested in? Is that useful?
I think one interesting trend to watch, and maybe, like, I think lean's, I think the heart is in the right place. There's other similar initiatives out there like Google AMP, which is very similar in that it restricts, I guess, ad loads, and I guess it prescribes the format of the ad,
Yeah.
right? One interesting, I think, thing there to watch in regards to data collection is that on these AMP pages, Google is going to be hosting the content on its own servers. I think the jury's still out on whether they will have any restrictions or impose any controls,
Right.
on what third-party pixels fire from ads.
Right.
So,
And so we saw actually another big move from Google either last week or the week before with Google's acceptable ads policy, which is, kind of marries AMP a little bit, but it's basically Google saying, like, this is what we think a lean or a good ad or a good ad experience looks like. And as such, we're only supporting what we deem are good ads. Like, is that the right way to go about this? Or is that just kind of like Google being Google and telling all of us what to do?
I think it's so. Working with Google, I can't say I have like privileged information in this, but I feel like it goes further than lean does because it is enforceable.
Right.
Given that it's at the inventory source, it's actually something that they can ensure that people live up to, whereas lean is still something that's being developed. It's still something that's, I guess you would say, in beta or even in alpha at this point. There's a lot of things in lean that aren't defined. To be honest, I haven't seen acceptable ads really articulated in a very clear way either. But it is interesting that it seems to be an extension of some of the partnerships that people like Google, Microsoft, Amazon have had with AdBlock Plus for several years now. It's even called the same sort of name, the same program. So it feels like there might be some consensus on the inventory side and even the tech side, the ad block side, around what really an acceptable ad is to consumers. And so for that reason, I feel like maybe lean is more, it's not the heart, it's the liver, but acceptable ads to me actually feels like closer to the center of what we really need to do from the advertiser side.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm in support of all of us, publisher side, agency side, any side, that's going to work together to try to fix the problem.
Right.
Because I actually think we as an industry created it. Maybe not the people necessarily on this panel, the bigger
Definitely not the
agencies,
people
right?
on
Not
this
the people on
panel.
this panel, or the bigger agencies that do things in the right way, working with their bigger brands. But a lot of other not so good people have created ad stacking and bad, non-frequent, no frequency capping, and ads that don't provide value and are put all over the place because, as we all know from the fraud space, there's an easy way to make money.
Yeah.
So I think all of us need to kind of get together and understand that this is an industry problem. It's to me no different than when we realized viewability was a problem or that fraud was a problem. This is another industry problem, and I think all of us working together. And again, I'm not always in agreement with everything Google does, but this is one case where I feel we all need to work together to try to fix an industry-related issue.
So maybe an organic yet enforceable agreement or standard that we can all get behind as an industry. Makes sense. So I want to just take it from the other side, from the publisher page. We talked about having like really shitty content and publisher experiences or like clickbait sites. Alejandro, I think, is gonna be my content champion on this panel. So let's say that pubs are really doubling down on UI and cleaning up their pages and really bringing scarcity back into the model. Is that something as buyers that we can get behind? Like, are you willing to pay more money for 300 by 250 because the page looks better, because there are fewer ads on the page?
I think a topic that gets very little attention. It's funny, we talk about all these operational things like ad blocking and viewability. Why don't people talk about attribution, right? And I think the answer to the question is sure. Right? If I have a sophisticated attribution model that tells me that this is the right thing to do, my suspicion is that a good attribution model will tell you exactly that higher quality content at a higher share of voice is going to drive more desirable actions.
Okay, that makes sense. So your bet is that, let's say your media costs go up 20% for the same inventory that you bought last year, but you're saying having a better, richer experience should play out in your performance, and you should be able to really back into the same efficiencies.
That's my hunch.
Okay.
To me, the CPM has always been too blunt of an instrument, really, as a buying sort of unit. It's gross. It obscures things like out of view impressions unless you're engaging in a 100% viewability contract. It obscures out of geo. It obscures off target. It obscures out of frequency range. So really, like, even the CPM is kind of a fool's game in terms of looking at your efficiency on that basis. And to be honest, even looking at just the CPM percentage that you consider to be valuable is a little bit of a fool's game, because ultimately we are held accountable to performance. So the end game is, what is your cost per incremental conversion or your cost per incremental perception shift? I think that if you start backing into that, it doesn't matter to me what I pay up front in terms of a CPM if I'm still getting the performance in the back end that I want. Ultimately, I always want to pay as little as I can. It's my job to maximize my client's budget. But if I can make the numbers work, I don't mind paying more for any sort of unit.
Okay. Brian?
Yeah, no, I would actually agree with that. I mean, let's back up a second. I don't think there's a content problem. I think there's a lot of great content out there. I think content, arguably, you could say, is in the minds of the beholder, or the eye of the beholder, right? I mean, a blog may be great quality content to somebody and crappy quality content to somebody else.
True.
I think it's about context and relevancy. I think there is demands that some content companies have to monetize that content to an extreme, and I think that absolutely has to get dialed back. Whether that means less ads on a page could be a solution, maybe not. But I do agree, particularly for some clients, when it comes to driving ROI or driving whatever their KPI is, I think there is should be a direct correlation to effectiveness. So, perhaps the solution is us working better with the publisher community to say, is there a solution where they could still make the money that they need to?
Yeah.
We get a better experience for our brands that we buy on those pages, and the consumers win at the end of the day because they get great content and hopefully some value out of the whether it's integrated experiences, whether it's flat out 300 by 250s or whatever the IAB standard is that gets put on a page. But there's a purpose, there's a reason, and there's quality there instead of what exists today.
That's a good point, and I think one way that we've seen her potentially buyers and sellers come together has been with championing native formats, right? So, like, let's drive more context and content relevant ads that are within the feed or within the natural UX of the page. So, I mean, is that a solution? Should we just all be trying to buy less irritating formats?
I mean, I'm sorry, Brian. I mean, it's one option, right? I mean, the reason why native works is because it's providing value.
Right.
You're in an area reading about specific content and you're getting an ad that's very relatable to what you're interested in. So again, it just comes back to everything that we've been talking about providing more value in the ad space.
So sorry, I want to press you on that, because is it actually value or is it form and function? Because I would argue that maybe like a 728 by 90 with a product that's pretty relevant but shows up in the middle of your article or shows up on the right rail with 6 other ads, you may block that, whereas a native ad, you're less bothered by that.
Maybe it's a little bit of a combination of both, but
Okay.
I know when we're specifically buying native ads, we're buying native ads and wrapping it around the content that
Right.
it's in.
Okay.
To provide, I mean, if there are people on food sites,
Yeah.
we're providing native ads that are providing recipes. You
So
know,
as buyers, are we being more thoughtful than with
correct.
native? Okay.
That's right. That's how we're approaching it, again, to provide that more value.
Okay.
But again, I think we have to press the publishers that when they come out with ad formats, and native is a great example of how to have a non-intrusive, I think, value conversation with a brand. There's plenty of other companies that they let in because, again, it's about the money.
Yeah.
And it's about perishable inventory and maximizing every single last
And
impression.
monetizing everything.
Yeah. And it ruins the experience. So, or it ruins the format. So instead of getting a great message from a respectable brand, or a brand, frankly, that you're interested in, or perhaps that you haven't heard of before, but you're getting clickbait. And it's just become a tremendous haven in a lot of cases that has not been monitored to the extent that I think some of these publishers should have, because it's unsold inventory, right? It's revenue left on the table. So I think there's got to be a balance again. And I'm not going after publishers. I mean, I spent first half of my career on the publisher side, so I've sat on that side of the table. There's got to be a way that says, don't really destroy the industry for the sake of profit. And I think there's opportunities to continue to innovate in the advertising space, but I think we've got to do it with responsibility. It can't be just unleashed to everyone and anyone that could possibly buy into it. Because unfortunately, to Steve's point, there's a lot of bad folks out there that will absolutely take advantage of every single last opportunity they can to drive fraud in this space. Just my 2 cents.
One thing we've said to publishers is that it's okay if your premium inventory sells out and there's a premium price for that inventory. That's okay.
Right.
I mean, when I wanted to buy, a TV spot during Friends on a Thursday night, there was only so many TV spots you could buy. That's inventory sold out, and there was a price point that you paid for that. I know I'm dating myself a little bit in the room here, but it's okay for publishers to say, this is 100% inviewable human trafficked impressions. I can't just find, bad impressions anymore like I used to and just create more inventory. So that's okay for that inventory to sell out, and I'm willing to pay a premium for that. And if that's premium inventory and I'm going to pay a premium price for it, and I'm going to put a quality ad on it that's got all the right caps in place and frequencies, the right audience targeting, et cetera, that should be an ad experience that consumers want to expect. And then, also, if it comes down to publishers having to create a dialogue with consumers to make sure as they're coming into their site, they understand that they can opt in for certain experiences, that could be part of the equation as well. But we should be, on our side, on the buy side, we should be willing to pay premium prices for things. That was a little distracting.
Sorry.
We should be able to pay a premium price for inventory that has got quality.
Good point. So back to the issue of reintroducing scarcity. I want to transition for a second, because part of this panel was how do we solve this problem creatively, and how does creative and technology come together to really attack the issue of ad blocking. So you being the buy-side leaders in the house today, I want to ask, what does this look like in your shop? Like, do you guys have creative technologists? Do you have UX departments that think about the experience outside of just the ad experience, but from the content on the page to all the way through the funnel to conversion? Like, what are you doing that we can learn from merging creative and technology?
So I'll go first. I mean, in our shop, I know we have a content team, and our content team is about delivering those experiences that are going to be high quality, and they're about beyond just creating a standard ad format. It's video that's going to work in a storytelling type of mode. And that's one of the first things that we talk about with our clients. Yeah, we know we got to do a lot of the block and tackling and buy the basic, the ad spaces. But for the most part, the ads that we want to push through for the bigger impact, the ads that you're expecting consumers to want to see and enjoy, are the ones that come from our content group that are creating the higher value content.
Does your content group touch DR?
They do.
Okay.
I think one interesting opportunity out there is to advertise to people that have the ad blockers on. After all, they're real people, right? If they have the ad blocker. And there's, there are options there. You can site serve. I think sponsorships could be very interesting, right? In the context of an audience that's blocking an ad. There's guys out there like SourcePoint and others that are figuring out how to message to people that are blocking third-party calls. I don't know, that might be an audience there worth exploring.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think it'll be interesting to see what comes out of the New York Times survey that they just put out. So I think 200,000 subscribers, 500,000 non-subscribers to get to people who are blocking ads currently.
Yeah.
To get their perceptions on why they're blocking and understanding the impact that has on the fact that they're getting free content right now. But from our perspective, we're unique in the fact that we do have a UX department. We've got creative, we've got technology, we've got data sciences, we've got media. So we've been able to break down those barriers and blend them together in very unique ways. So a lot of the work that we've done on Mercedes with Take the Wheel and kind of hacking Instagram and giving consumers the opportunity to build their own accuracy RX and do it in the convenience of their phone and kind of have that interaction. So Mercedes Take the Wheel we gave 5 very prominent social media folks Mercedes to drive around. They got to
Nice.
take pictures everywhere. Yeah. No, one got to keep the car, the person who won. But they were able to create content experiences and do cool things with the car to really drive down the overall average age of the Mercedes consumer. And tremendous success, record, breaking sales on that within that demo. So if you can create compelling experiences leveraging data, technology, creative in ways that kind of transcend how we traditionally think about marketing, that creates very unique ways. And consumers love that. They will engage, they will react, what we ultimately want them to do is buy. So I think there's absolutely existing and yet to be created ways to be able to do that, blending those things together. And we're certainly excited to continue to figure out how to do that.
Nice.
I think that at Essence, we've taken, again, kind of a patchwork approach where it's sort of each team or each discipline has their own role to play. So within the creative team, we still want them to focus on storytelling first and foremost. Tell beautiful stories regardless of format, regardless of screen. You should focus on figuring out the best and most relevant way to connect with a user. So we try not to tax them too much, with sort of the technical side. We want them to tell beautiful stories that are powered by data, that are as relevant as they possibly can be. On the sort of tech side, that's a little bit of like, a group of people across multiple disciplines focused on ensuring that the technology that underpins that creative is as sort of frictionless and light as it possibly can be. So really focusing on ensuring that like the data calls work well together and that those are totally QA'd and are streamlined, that the way that the ad tag itself is architected is done appropriately such that there aren't unnecessary ad calls, really trying to like streamline the ad stack in general. And from a media side, really it's our job, my job, to sort of have the conversation with our clients, with our creative agencies, either internally or externally, and with publishers to kind of like educate them around what our goals are, and ultimately try to get them to hew to the same sort of vision and standard. I think the interesting thing is that it hasn't represented a departure from what we were doing before ad blocking became an issue. We really try to start from a user-first perspective. So we've always felt that being respectful of your audience is the best way ultimately to drive performance. So even before we started talking about ad blocking, it was important for us to have a positive user experience, to be respectful of frequency, to be respectful of the role that data and personalization plays to users. So I think that there's a nice sort of a coming together of those two work streams, but it's interesting that a lot of those sort of practices were already in place a little bit.
Okay, that makes sense. So it sounds like a lot of you are approaching it with integration between your teams and just really having an empathy for the consumer and a mind for what that journey looks like. So, are any of your advertisers talking about ad blocking? Are they asking you about it? Are these conversations that you're having at your agencies?
Some of my advertisers have ad blockers installed. Makes it, interesting.
It's mind-blowing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, all of our clients have asked for our perspective on it and the point of view. And, obviously our main thing is obviously to tell them how we feel about it from an industry perspective and the ways. They're just concerned, again, they know that working with MediaCom that they're only paying for ads that are seen. So there's not a concern from them or a panic that they're blowing money or wasting money because ads are being blocked.
Right.
That's not their concern. The conversation that they're having with us and that we're having back with them is about the impact on the industry, impact on the free internet, the impact on what that means for overall content And what we're all going to do, IAB, Mediacom, agencies, client side, brand side, what are we all going to do to make that experience better?
Yeah.
And that's what encourages me, is that I know we're working with a lot of big brands, and they're all in the same mindset of, we need to make this better. Our way of giving back to the future people who are going to be working in this space is that we're going to create an industry that's going to be beautiful and storytelling and about content and connections, and how we're driving a quality experience, so that we're not known as the era that created the death of the ad.
Right. Brian, anyone at your agency talking about ad blocking?
Yeah, I mean, similar, we're having that higher level conversation about how do we elevate the experiences that we have, and how we create, and how do we think about engaging those consumers, and whether it's data driven or whether it's content driven. Particularly with the clients that are direct response, I mean, we certainly see the impact that, or we're monitoring the impact that this potentially could have. But I think there's a much larger play here that we're trying to, as I think as an industry, have a responsibility, because I think it's not one agency alone that's going to be able to conquer this. I think it's got to be a much bigger collective conversation, that how do we give consumers, in one part, a compelling reason to be able to not ad block, but at the same point, how do we, in the inevitability perhaps that this becomes a much more pervasive practice, that we're prepared for it, that our clients were prepared for it, and we continue to do for them what they need us to do as their agents, to help them hit their goals and their objectives.
So I think that we have conversations about this pretty much on a regular basis with all of our clients, and it's always really interesting because there's a moment of panic, and then there's kind of like an acceptance, and then when you actually get into a campaign context, there is very much well, yeah, but I still want to run like the super heavy ad with the 2-minute video that expands. So it's kind of funny that you can have these conversations in the abstract, but when the rubber meets the road, clients still want to see the beautiful ad that, like, they want their anthemic spot. They want their, well, I have a retina screen. Why isn't it, why does my ad look like shit on this screen? So it feels like there's still a bit of a disconnect between sort of the philosophical media ivory tower discussion and then the reality of, what does my actual campaign look like in the real world?
Right, and what does it look like in practice? Okay, so the last question I want to ask is, this feels similar to something that we went through with TV, right? So VOD, TiVo came out, and everyone freaked out and said, oh my God, everyone's going to fast forward through all the commercials. TV advertising isn't going to be valuable anymore. No one watches it. TV's going away. That obviously never happened. Is ad blocking analogous to that situation? Is there something we can learn from TV or from broadcast when we think about our business and apply it there?
Did we learn anything from in TV?
That is my question to you, Jesse.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the sort of the move towards commercial ratings was certainly a good thing for TV, and it feels like the measurement of viewable sort of human traffic is analogous to that. I think the emphasis on things like live programming, event sort of programming, is something that probably you'll start to see duplicated in a digital space, where you try to really go after things that people are less inclined to block, potentially. It's also probably more along the lines of emphasizing content production as opposed to just ad distribution. But interestingly, I think that, not from an advertiser perspective, but from a publisher perspective, I think the thing that they probably need to, the lessons they need to be learning, I would draw from sort of the music industry, where the industry started, having a product that was very premium and was generating a lot of revenue, and then suddenly became sort of devalued and somewhat free overnight. And what you've seen in music is that the revenue streams have increased. The emphasis on touring and merchandise have greatly sort of become to be much more important. So it feels like publishers need to reevaluate the inventory streams, or the income streams rather, that they take advantage of.
Okay.
So you see people focusing on event marketing, hosting events. You see people doing sort of more premium things that might have an incremental income stream from them. I would say that that's the lessons that I would try to draw from if I was on that side of the house.
Okay.
Yeah, Steve's got his own merchandising line, by the way. He's extremely successful. He'll have a booth out back after the panel.
Yeah, I would say that you could argue that TiVo sort of signaled, a new way that consumers wanted to see television. They wanted it streamed and they wanted it on demand. Maybe, analogously, ad blocking is a signal that consumers, maybe they don't want to go to websites and sort of go through a homepage and click through on articles anymore. Maybe they want a different experience, right, to consume their advertising. So from that sense, yeah, I think there's an analogy. Maybe another interesting analogy could be to email, right? Like 15 years ago, if you were sending out mass emails, you were probably concerned about spam blockers and getting into inboxes and such. And where are we today? I mean, I think a lot of people use Gmail or something very similar, and Gmail has a promotions tab. And arguably, all of that works better now that it's all consolidated and in one channel, and you don't have, 90,000 ISPs spamming everyone.
So rethinking experiences and how content is delivered. Okay, that makes sense.
I mean, I'm happy to jump in. These guys already said it all, in a wonderful way. But I think the ad blocking thing is very specific. I mean, ad blocking has been around for 15 years. This isn't new, right? Ad blocking got hot right now and it got big because from a mobile experience, it started costing people money.
Yeah.
It was very heavy video content. Things took too long to load. It was chewing up your data plans, and that created a terrible experience. TiVo was invented for a very different reason, and I think everything that was said was sort of, it's right in terms of how that changed the TV experience. And C3 and C7 sort of came back to balance those ratings. Ad blocking is different. Ad blocking is just, this sucks. This is costing me a lot of money. I don't want this. It's slow. I'm trying to get something quick. I'm on my phone. I'm looking for something, and I got to wait for 15 ads to download. That's the bad experience. And to me, I think it is slightly different from what TiVo was out to solve to what we have to solve in the digital space.
Okay, wonderful. I'm going to wrap on that because I've been spying on some publisher name tags in the audience, so I really want to do Q&A. You were the first hand that I saw.
If you could stand and tell us who you are and who you're with.
Thank you. Hi, Joe Dodato. Good to see you all. I'm from Centro, so know a few of you guys. Just wanted to ask you if there's a particular publisher that you feel like is doing it right in terms of either offering, free content or paid, or you mentioned the New York Times and they're going to do a survey, but I know Wired kind of came out and asked everybody to not do the blockers, to actually get the content. Is there any particular publisher that is doing something right out there?
I mean, I thought Washington Post was very first and early to market here with this. They tried a couple of different things. I'm not saying they were all right. In some cases, they were forcing people to kind of go to a subscription model. They had to pull back from that because it didn't work. But I'll tell you what they did. What they did was they started a dialogue. Whether or not that dialogue, when they were trying to push people towards subscription or whatnot, which they realized wasn't the right strategy, that dialogue with their traffic, with their consumers coming in, began to have people say, hey, I'll opt in for this because I realize I have to pay for this content in some way, shape, or form. So to me, it's all about initially starting that dialogue. What I don't like to hear from publishers, and I've had many big names, I won't mention them in this room, but many big name publishers have come to me and said, don't worry, Steve, I'm blocking the ad blockers. And I'm like, don't you dare do that. Don't do that and serve my ads after that. I don't have anything to do with you going out there blocking ad blockers. People don't want the ad. That's fine. Let's find so that they do want the ads. So I just like the fact that Washington Post, they came out early and they started that dialogue with the consumers to get to the right place of opting in for the experience that they would be interested in.
Yeah, I think Forbes did that as well. And they had maybe 30% of people just agree to turn off their ad blocker. So yeah, I think that's happening a lot. People trying to start a dialogue as opposed to just this arms race for blocking blockers and
not the right way to go.
I don't know if publishers would like this answer, but I think Facebook is doing a good job. Instant articles, and that's a space to watch, right? They're not going to be subject to any of these problems.
Well, but the publishers are pressing Facebook and to some degree succeeding in getting Facebook to place more ads within instant articles because the publishers can't monetize off of the instant articles well enough. So we're sort of getting into the same thing. I had a question about implementation, because all of you have been talking about getting together with publishers, and publishers bringing better metrics to the table about ad effectiveness, better assurances about inventory and your willingness to pay more. How does that get organized? Because so far it's very ad hoc. It's individual publishers talking with individual agencies about specific placements. Clearly the IAB's Lean initiative is not getting traction. Most people don't even know it exists. Where does this come from if it's actually going to be organized in an industry-wide way? Who drives it?
Well, I mean, I think from an agency perspective, you've got enough holding companies that operate in a singular fashion. Group M operates in a singular fashion. We've just reorganized recently around in Publicis. So we've got Publicis Media and Publicis.Sapient. So we are collectively en masse having conversations with some of the biggest publishers. So there's a lot of at stake for them. There's a lot at stake for everybody. So that dialogue is happening at a very high, very senior level. And I would probably say across all holding companies as well. So I think that as a starting point, it's certainly not the definitive point by any stretch of imagination, but I mean, you've got some folks from a publisher standpoint, they're certainly going to listen, because there's a lot of money on the table if they don't do something about it.
Frankly, I'm going to sort of beg off responsibility for this a little bit on the agency side. I think ad blocking is really important as a sort of a consumer trend and something that you need to pay attention to, and we need to do our part to contribute to the solution. But honestly, from my perspective, the onus is on the publishers. When you talk about the revenue lost, what is it, $22 billion in the U.S. supposedly in 2015, and projected to be like $40 billion in the U.S. or something in 2016, I think, in that Page Fair report that came out. That's a publisher real hit, to be totally honest. From an advertiser perspective, it influences my ability to generate mass scale, so that's bad. And ultimately, I do want my users to get a good experience with my ads, but ultimately, it's more, I think that the onus is on the publishers to solve. So I don't think that the agencies need to be the ones with the whip at the feet of the publishers. I feel like it's our job to fix viewability. It's our job to fix non-human traffic. Those are things that influence whether or not the inventory that we buy performs, but this is simply an issue about whether or not the inventory exists. So I want to be at the table and help drive that solution, but I actually would put the leadership squarely in the court of publishers. And I think that it's up to them whether or not they want to do that as an entire industry or individual.
I agree, but I just want to say I think it's on us to really kind of walk the talk and be committed to working with publishers and figuring this out. A lot of what my team does on a day-to-day basis is vetting new technologies, working with publishers, running tests, going through trial and error of figuring out how we can make these experiences work and how we can scale them programmatically. And while the onus is on the publisher, we have to be really committed to putting in the hard and sometimes laborious work to get that done. Also, former IAB me just wants to say that Lean is very new, so give it some time. I don't want to sit up here and trash Lean. It's brand new. Yeah.
Maybe a question.
Hang on.
So your name and where you're from.
Mike from FXCM. So Jesse, you were just talking about where the onus lies, and then Brian, you mentioned before the conversations you guys are having with some of the larger publishers. So I'm curious to hear from you guys. Usually the onus isn't just on one side; it's on both sides to some degree. So I'd like to know what you guys, what those conversations with the publishers look like, given the amount of money that's clearly being lost to ad blocking right now, and that in theory could continue to accelerate. And then the other side of it, how much, onus do we have to place on the brands, because, they do have the ability to create experiences for customers. Many of them are good, many of them are not good, and we have a long way to go, especially I think when it comes to mobile, because it's a lot harder, and you guys have sort of alluded to that.
So, since I was name checked on that one, I'll start. it's good to say bold things at these sorts of things. I'm not putting 100% of the responsibility on the part of the publisher. I do think that they need to lead. It is something that is closer to their bottom line than it is to advertisers or to agencies ultimately. But I do want to be part of the solution as well. I think that the biggest thing that I look for publishers to do is hold the line on specs. That's always been like where this comes into play, right? Is what do you actually accept running? Do you accept running ads that are out of spec, that are too heavy? How much testing do you do on ad tags? Which kind of advertisers do you allow and which kind of advertisers do you not? I think that, standards, and I used to advertise in a kids context, and you just wouldn't even believe the kinds of ads that were, rejected from running because there was an exclamation point or whatever. And I think that's all, the spirit was in the right place, but I think that you can broaden that to the entire industry, and you can say that, we only work with advertisers rather, who are adhering to frequency caps. We only work with advertisers who, sort of submit to a rigorous tag testing. I think that that's a question that individual publishers need to grapple with. And again, I want to do my part, but I feel like it is something that needs to be led by the publisher side.
Yeah, and I can say, when we have these conversations, it's not solely about ad blocking. I mean, there's a lot of issues, there's a lot of fish that we want to fry. There's certainly conversations about efficiency. There's about innovation and access, and how do we evolve what we're trying to do with our clients. So certainly this is one of many things that we have a conversation about, because it certainly impacts the results. You can get great rates, but if we don't have the scale of the inventory to be able to deliver against that because the ads being blocked, then that kind of defeats that purpose. But from the creative angle, some of the conversations, because we are somewhat unique within Publicis.Sapient, that we've got Digitas and Razorfish and Sapient, so they have the conversation much broader than just a media conversation. It's how do we bring creative resources to the table? How do we bring dev and UX and experience to integrate into those platforms as well? It's a completely different set of doors that they can get access to a broad variety and array of clients that help to elevate that creative experience, that help to elevate that creative dialogue. And you've got folks that are very digitally minded to be able to figure out what is that next innovative solution that the publisher hasn't thought about. And if we could bring value to them as well, because we're creating something unique on their site, bringing a multitude of different discipline resources to the table, I think it's very attractive to them. So when we have those conversations, it's across a number of different facets, but it creates a very interesting and a very unique dialogue that I think they're very open to having, because they're trying to improve themselves in many cases.
Just go ahead, sorry.
That's why I'm a big fan of private marketplace deals, because I think when you're working in a private marketplace deals with publishers, you can really start getting into the nuances of how to make them make more money with good quality inventory, and know that I'm going to be able to bring a pool of clients into that mix. So, that to me, listen, that doesn't stop a consumer from still wanting to block those ads, but at least that learning aspect starts to happen where there's a controlled environment, quality inventory, quality ads going in, quality pricing attached to it, and everybody wins. The goal is that everybody wins.
No, 100% agree. I think what the buy side can do to help that along is value inventory correctly. I think a lot of the focus has been on valuing audience, right? And that has led to, a lot of times you pay the same for somebody that sees an ad on a page that was, written by somebody who went to journalism school and had been edited after like months of investigative work, right? You pay the same as a page view on a, video of somebody getting like a bucket of ice thrown over their head. I just don't think that's right. So from the advertiser side, yeah, let's get good attribution models, let's kick the last view attribution habit, and hopefully that'll lead to a higher valuation of professionally produced content.
I'm sorry guys, we need to wrap that. And on the note of higher quality and better measurement, thank you all very much.
Thank you.
And a reminder to everyone, we're not only live streaming all of this at MediaPost.com, so you can ping any of your friends who might want to tune in. archiving all of this, if you go back to work here, that are really driving this automation and some of the principles of media buying and selling that really are beneath this. And that's what he wants to talk about today. Luke is the Director of Media and Connections at Johnson & Johnson. He oversees all the programmatic across brands, both in North America and Latin America. He came to Johnson & Johnson from J3, which is part of UM, and held roles at MediaCom and OMD. Please welcome Luke Kygel.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you. Thank you very much, and thank you all for having me. As Steve said, my name is Luke Kygel. I lead Media and Connections at Johnson & Johnson for the Americas, and I'm honored and excited to be here to share a perspective on programmatic with you. Before I get into it, Steve gave you a brief introduction. I'm going to actually give you a brief one myself. I think I just have to unpause this. Hold, please. No? A little AV help, perhaps. There's a dialogue box up. And I tried to... there we go. All right. So, as I said, my name is Luke. I'm a native New Yorker. I'm from here. As a native New Yorker, I derive a lot of excitement and oftentimes a lot of pain from these guys right here. I grew up in the business on the agency side of the world. I worked at MediaCom. I worked at OMD. I worked at J3. I loved it all. J3 obviously being my last stop, and the Johnson & Johnson arm of Universal McCann. I'm sure folks are familiar. About 2.5 years ago, I was given the opportunity to switch seats, and so I joined Johnson & Johnson. When I joined J&J, I was in our internal digital center of excellence. Fast forward a little while, about 1.5 years ago, was given the opportunity to return to my roots, so to speak, in media, and now here I am. So as Steve said, I have responsibilities for media and connections across the Americas. But I'm also charged with leading our approach to the programmatic space globally. And it's exciting. It's exciting. There's so much happening. And I'm not sure there's a more exciting time to be in our business and to be in our industry. And there's just so much happening and there's so much change. And we're in the age of the empowered consumer, and the consumer has more choice than ever before. And the industry is trying to evolve to keep up. And in doing so, we have this convergence of media and marketing and technology, and they're all coming together. And as they come together, it's creating this sometimes unspoken tension between the old world and the new world. And that tension is uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable for a lot of folks because it's nebulous and it's new and it's a little bit daunting. But as uncomfortable as it is, it's also awesome. And it's awesome because of the possibilities that it creates, and the possibilities that the infusion of technology into media is actually bringing to what we can do and how we can improve how we do marketing. And this is especially true in the media space. So as we know, the media industry is one that's constantly changing, constantly evolving. We're always innovating. There's always something new. But only every so often, there's a time in the media industry where we are at a true inflection point, a true pivotal point in our industry, and I believe that we are there today. It's a time of great change, and there we are. We're very excited. The industry is very excited to get where we are going. And in part, this is the game changer. All right, the game changer was when digital reached a tipping point. And so what does this mean? Not literally. I mean, literally, this means that in 2017, digital will surpass television for the #1 share of advertising revenue globally. This change happened in the US in 2016 globally, projected to happen in 2017. These numbers are from Magna Global. There are different sources that might have different numbers, but the trends tend to be the same. So that's literally what this is. But what it means is open minds and credibility. And what I mean by that is if you go back 5-10 years, we could talk about all the amazing things you can do with digital, and there's more targeting, and you can do buying, you can do it in real time. And when digital represented 5 to 10% of the mix, especially in the CPG world where I come from, who would listen? Nobody cared. Now, all of a sudden, when you go to have that conversation, because of this, you have weight behind you. It has teeth, and people will listen. And it changes the dynamic of what you can do, and it changes what we can bring to the industry and how media can fully impact and change and revolutionize how we do marketing. And this is obviously what's behind a lot of it, and obviously why folks are here today. And I would tell you, Steve said I was going to maybe bring, call it a different perspective. I don't know. But I would tell you, programmatic to me is a little bit like the Ring of Power. It's like I love it and hate it at the same time. I love it because of what it represents and the promise of what it can bring, and also what we can do today, right? Who doesn't want to be able to leverage data to understand their consumer better, to segment their audience, to be able to personalize and customize messaging so it's more relevant, and so they don't want to block it to the point that we heard before, and then be able to execute in real time and optimize in real time? Who wouldn't want to do that? But at the same time, the concept of programmatic, the word, sometimes bother me, and it bothers me because in some ways it sets up a dichotomy of it's the programmatic bucket versus everything else. And it makes it difficult to think about how everything works together. And honestly, if I had my way, the word programmatic would actually be come and gone from our vocabulary as soon as is humanly possible. And it would happen because it would be replaced by the principles and concepts of what you do in programmatic being infused into the DNA of our industry. So we don't do programmatic, we just do media. We just do marketing. And we don't talk about it as this separate thing. It's just how we operate. And I've said I'm not crazy about the word programmatic, and I will tell you why. And I'm going to share 3 reasons as to why I feel this way. I can't guarantee everyone will agree with me. Hopefully, at the very least, you'll see where I'm coming from. And I can promise you that all I'm coming from, as someone who's proud to be in this industry and proud of what media represents in the industry, all I want to do is get to the promise of what it represents as fast as is humanly possible. So that's the lens at which I'm looking through as I talk to you about where we are, where we're going, and my perception of the word programmatic itself. All right, so I said 3 reasons. First one, it's friggin' confusing. It is confusing. If we took a poll of this room, like literally, if we went around to each person and we said, what does programmatic mean? How many different responses do you think we would get? 40, 60. It means so many things to so many people that at the end of the day, does it actually mean anything? Right? Something that means everything, does it actually have any meaning at all? And this is something that I struggle with. I imagine folks in your business, as you talk to them about programmatic, they struggle with it. Senior leaders in organizations, they certainly struggle with it. The fact that you can't go 2 days without an article in the trades about programmatic this, programmatic that, there's just so much noise. So much noise. And I get it, right? The space is complex. It is complex. And God bless the folks at Luma Partners for doing this work and being able to put complexity on a page. It's amazing. And obviously, a lot of work, and someone spent a lot of time to actually do that. The space is complex, and I understand that. But the concept is actually pretty simple. So what are we doing in programmatic? We're defining segments, we're customizing communication, and we're executing in real time. We're delivering the fundamentals of marketing. The fundamentals of marketing have been around for 100 years. And they haven't really changed. Like, what are we trying to do? We're trying to create demand about the brands and products that we have. And one way to do that, arguably the best way to do that, is to deliver a relevant message to the right audience at the right time. The difference today is we have technology and we have data that enables us to do it faster and better than we've ever been able to do it before. But the concept doesn't really change. So I maintain that the work, the time, could be spent in taking what's complex. I'm going to go back for 1 second. Take what's complex and figure out how to simplify it. And that's what's going to enable change faster. Remember, my whole point is what's going to get us to the promise of where our industry is going, that media is leading. What's going to get us there faster. Here's a quote. The interweb says that Da Vinci said it. I don't know. Apple definitely did. Simplicity being the ultimate sophistication. And it's a beautiful quote. It's a beautiful concept. And it talks about the work and the sophistication in actually making things simple. One thing I know to be true, Emerson wrote, to be simple is to be great. And greatness is hard. Greatness is hard. If it wasn't hard, everybody would be it. Everybody would do it. But putting the work, putting the time, putting the effort into actually making it simple for people to understand, I think will get us to the change that we want to get to faster. So now we come to the shameless plug portion of the presentation. So I'm going to share with you a video about a campaign that we executed for our Neutrogena brand. And as you watch this video, I would say obviously watch it and look for what's in there, but also look for what's not in there, because what you won't see is all of the reams of data and relationships and technology, all the things that we did underneath it to make it happen. What you will see is a very simple story around what we did and why it's meaningful and why it was successful for our business. And if I can AV it right, we will actually make it work. So I love that. I probably can never get tired of watching that video. And we won some awards for this campaign, and that was awesome. And honestly, we've executed probably more complex programs and campaigns than this, but what I love about it is the simple way in which the team told the story. And that's something that, again, when you're talking to senior leaders, when you're trying to change an industry, when you're trying to impact things in totality, the ability to actually explain it in a way people understand and show actual true business results is what's actually going to drive that change. So here's another quote. This one I know was said because I was there, and I'm sure my old boss is not the only person that said this, but my old boss said that, my old boss said that everyone is someone else's assistant planner, and he said it in the context of scheduling meetings for our CEO that he didn't want to do. But what he means by that, and if you think about it, everyone's accountable to someone. We all have bosses. We all have people that we're accountable to. We have clients. And if you think about how do you get things done in your own organization? How do you navigate complexity? More and more companies are matrixed, and you have dot lines, and you have to talk and deal with different people. So how do you get things done? And how do you enroll support? You simplify it for people. So I maintain we apply that same concept and we apply that same thing to how we talk about programmatic, how we talk about the work that we're doing, and we simplify it, and we will enact the change that we want to get to a little bit quicker. All right, that was my first reason. Second one is there's so much emphasis on the technology, that in many ways we forget that this is a people business. This industry is founded on people and the relationships that you build with people. And my caveat to this is by no means am I saying the technology is not important. The technology is amazing. And obviously, if it wasn't for that technology, we wouldn't be here. So the people who build those technologies and the people that are way smarter than me that can actually do it are obviously a huge part of this. And they are very, very valuable. But at the end of the day, who is going to drive this change? It will be the people who actually figure out how to apply those technologies. So here's something that we hear. I'll throw another quote at you. Everything's going to be programmatic in 5 years, right? Everybody says this. Okay, maybe not everybody, but a lot of people say it. I've heard it, you've heard it, maybe you've said it, right? Everything's going to be programmatic in 5 years. It's all going programmatic. You won't be able to do anything but programmatic 5 years from now. And I say, well, is it? Is it really? Do we know that? And when people talk about programmatic, oftentimes there's this sense of inevitability that it's just going to happen. And we can just sit back and watch while everything goes programmatic, because inevitably it's going to happen. Well, how? How and who? Who's going to actually make that happen? We are. I am, you are, folks like us. Like, we are actually going to be the ones that will make that a reality, that will shape it. And I know I showed a chart that showed digital surpassing TV, and the digital will continue to grow. But again, 2020 is a long time from now. How do we know that's going to happen? We don't. It will actually require people to make it happen. And how are we going to get there? So we spend a lot of time as an industry focused here. And I get it. It makes perfect sense. I understand why we're focused here. This is a lot of money. These are global dollars again. It's a lot of money. And when we talk programmatic, we're often focused on those to the video and the display. You can throw native in there as well if you want. And again, that's a lot of money. It's about $45 billion globally that we're talking a lot about getting a greater share of. And that's not wrong. That's not wrong at all. But at the end of the day, what's the size of the prize? And what are we playing for? What are we actually trying to do? And what's going to change our industry? What's going to change the way we execute marketing and we execute media in the modern day? We spend a lot of time, and I personally have a lot of these conversations where we're focused on how do we get dollars out of the TV world, and we're trying to pull the dollars out of the TV world to grow that other pie. And is it realistic? Is it realistic to think that we're going to shrink this guy, double the size, and grow that guy, or shrink this guy half the size, grow that guy double the size? Is that realistic? In order to achieve what we showed before, and in order to make everything programmatic, something's going to have to give somewhere. So again, where is the opportunity? A lot is said about TV. Nobody watches TV. TV's dead. Not really true. And in fact, the broadcast upfront this year is predicted to be up. If TV was dead, we wouldn't have our entire industry dumping money into an upfront marketplace to buy 30-second spots, right? Back to the little bit of the tension between the old world and the new world. You could argue, And I could talk about the upfront for a long time. You could argue that that's right or that's not right. But you can't argue with the history of effectiveness. And it's there. And there's data to prove it. What we're trying to get to is something new and something different. And I maintain, what if we spent our time actually shaping the change of how traditional media works? And again, this is happening in pockets. I'm talking about at scale everywhere. Because again, if the notion is everything's going to be programmatic in 5 years, are we going to get there by shrinking that and growing that? Or are we going to get there by taking the principles of what make programmatic great, and the fact that we can do better targeting, the fact that we can do segmented messaging, the fact that we can execute in real time, and applying it to this? And I don't know if any other folks were at the NBC Universal up front yesterday, but I applaud Linda Yaccarino and her team, because at the very least what they're doing is they're putting a line in the sand. They're making a statement about what they believe is the future of their business. And in part, they're doing it by combining all of their entities to have one up front. I think that was a bold move, good for them. But also about taking a stance and building out the opportunity to have programmatic inventory. And it's not the end, right? That's just a start. It's just a start, but it's a start that's going to get us there. Because if everything's going to be programmatic, it will require companies like that, companies like yours, companies like ours. It's going to people to sit in rooms and figure out how to test and learn and pilot and understand our way to get to everything being programmatic. And until we can buy television at scale, and I mean broadcast television, let's say, until I can buy ABC nationally, segmented against an audience that's based on their behaviors, with customized messaging, executed in real time, then everything isn't programmatic, and it won't be. So again, the technology is amazing, and the technology will obviously enable our ability to do it. But we will have to shape it, and we will have to create what that looks like, and we will need to work with the folks on the publisher side, on the broadcast side, the heritage print public. Like, everybody will play a role. And again, I know this is happening in pockets, but I'm talking about it happening at scale. And again, to remind you, my goal is to get to the promise of where we're trying to get to as quickly as is humanly possible. All right, that was my second thing. Here's my third. The word creates division. And I mentioned this a little bit earlier. It creates division because we talk about programmatic separate from everything else. And I can't speak for every single company across the industry, but most of the time that I hear, just in general industry conversations, you hear about programmatic, it's contrasted to something else. Programmatic versus traditional. Programmatic versus the old way of buying. Programmatic versus social. Programmatic versus email. And I'm not sure that that's what's going to get us to where we need to be. One example. Here's one example. I saw someone speak. Tremendous speaker in our industry. I imagine all of you have probably seen this person speak. Tremendous speaker, very well respected. And he was talking about the power of social media and Facebook in particular. And in that conversation, this statement was made contrasting Facebook media against programmatic. And it was, your agency is going to want to sell you programmatic because they want to make money, rather than pushing Facebook, which in this context is so much better. And a little tangent for a second, my first reaction to that was, well, first of all, if you have that much distrust in your agency, then you probably need a new agency. And I'm not naive, I'm not stupid. The agencies exist. I came from one, obviously. Agencies exist, they're a business, they need to make money. That is part of it. But there are people in the agency world who care just as much about your business as they do their own. There are people in the agency world who will put their blood, sweat, and tears into growing your business because they actually believe fundamentally that growing your business is how they'll actually grow their own and they'll be successful. So I would say, your Jerry Maguire exists in the agency, go out and find them if that's not what you have right now. All right, so that was a little tangent. The second thing I thought was, okay, well, what do you do in Facebook? Do you not use data to understand consumer habits and then build messaging that's customized for that person and then execute it at scale in real time? Well, that feels pretty programmatic to me. So why are they separate things? And why are we trying to sell one or push one over the other? It seems like you're pretty much doing the same thing. And the more and more I thought about it, the more I kind of got to, this is part of the problem that we have as an industry, right? We get in our own way a lot. We get in our own way, and some of the ways we get in our own way is by pushing one discipline over another. And again, I maintain it's not about pushing one discipline over another. Many disciplines on a particular business, many disciplines will have a role to play. And I think there's value in understanding the role that your particular discipline can play, and then also how it can be applied. And I'll give you an example. Poetic license, kind of a real-world example. Maybe you can identify with it, maybe you can't. But I'm going to introduce you to the data guy. Data guy is a relatively new phenomenon in our business, I'd say maybe a year and a half, 2 years. And the data guy, and I promise you I'm not making a political statement by the fact that it's a data guy. Generally speaking, in my experience anyways, it is most likely to be a guy. But the data guy comes when I'm going to have a meeting and the people go, I'm going to bring my data guy to the meeting. Oh, you want to talk programmatic? I'll bring my data guy. It'll be great. You bring your data guy, I'll bring my data guy, and they'll talk to each other. Oh, you asked me a question. I'll go to my data guy. They'll answer that question for you. I'll get back to you in 3 days. And then you're sitting in the meeting, and the data guys start talking. And what? The data guy speaks. Everybody else is like, what the? And you're like, dude, I don't know what you're saying, but it sounds really smart, and I'm really glad that you're on my team. That's awesome. And again, I maintain, I'm coming back to what's going to get us to the promise of where the industry is headed faster. And ultimately what that means is it's not about one discipline over another. It's not about you zone out when the data guy does his thing. Because at the end of the day, it's us. It's you, it's me. We need to understand that language. We need to understand the principles of what that person is applying and the role that that plays and how that fits into the overall ecosystem. And that's what's really going to bring things home. And that's what's going to make a difference. And I honestly fundamentally believe that the people who understand that, the people who get that, will be successful in this new world. And obviously, you can't teach curiosity, right? You can't teach it. But there's nothing stopping any one of us from going and spending time and learning a new discipline and reading and sitting with the experts. There's always going to be experts. I'm not trying to say that everyone's supposed to be an expert in everything. That's not what I'm trying to say. What I'm trying to say is understand enough about the discipline so that you can apply it. And you can help use that to understand how your discipline then fits into the overall ecosystem. And I'm sure that your data guy would be more than happy to spend time with you explaining it. If you are the data guy, I'm sure you'd be more than happy to spend time explaining it to the folks in the other functions and getting to a point where you speak the same language and you understand each other. So we're coming up on the end, and I think we're maybe a little decent on time, maybe a little. So we will wrap it up. And again, so my goal, get programmatic to be ingrained, embedded into our DNA. If you take nothing away from it, I maintain the 3 things. Simplify it. If you want enrollment, you want to drive change, make it simple for people to understand so that they can feel confident and confident in their own decisions and their own support for what you're trying to drive change for. Don't assume inevitability. Don't assume it's just going to happen. Be part of that solution. Be part of shaping it and create what that future looks like. Create that everything is going to be programmatic. Make it happen. And then the last being learn some new languages. Go out and spend time and understand that it's on us. It's on all of us, myself included. It's not like I've figured this all out. I'm a work in progress. And I spend time trying to learn and trying to understand. And there's a lot I still don't get. When the data guy speaks, there's still a lot I don't understand, but I aspire to, and I want to. And at the end of the day, we're talking about changing an industry. And someone who grew up in the media space, I love it. I love being part of this industry. I love being part of media. When I started in the business, It was like the tail end, the remnants and legacy of the Mad Men era, where media had a seat at the table, but we didn't always get to speak. Media might have been in the presentation, but we didn't always get to present. And now look where we are. Like, we are the face of changing the industry. The media industry is changing what it means to do marketing. I aspire to be a part of that. Hopefully you do too. So let's go and do that. Thank you very much.
We have time for a couple of questions. If anybody has some questions of Luke? Tell us a little bit about how organizationally you're trying to implement this.
Yeah, so it's a great question. The short answer is not easily, right? Like, our company's been around for 130 years. It's a lot of change that we're trying to bring. And I would say we're doing it from a couple different levels. I think you need a little bit of a groundswell of grassroots. And you find that by finding other people that have similar knowledge, similar expertise, and similar passion, and you enroll them and you bring them in. And I'm fortunate enough to have people in every single region of the world who have that. And we're enrolling them and we're bringing them in and we're creating something together. And at the same time, we're talking to our senior leaders and getting them aligned and getting them enrolled so that we're getting support from the top down, support from the bottom up. We're at the early stages of our journey. We have some markets that we're way more sophisticated than others. I think in the US in particular, I would say we're fairly advanced in what we could do. But we're at the early stages of our journey all in, and it's something that we're working towards.
But I gather that video that you showed is as much for internal use and selling your colleagues on the capabilities of programmatic to do things creatively, both with data and also with the art of creative.
Yeah, the original purpose of that video was to submit for the awards and some of the awards that we won. I'm not going to lie, I've gotten a lot of mileage out of it internally as well, because it does. It crystallizes for people what conceptually is hard for them to understand. And especially if you're a business leader. Think if you're the chairman of a sector of a giant company, your knowledge of media is like this. And then you want to talk about programmatic. You're like, what? Like, But if you crystallize it, then it's, oh, I get this. This is the future. I understand it. Now I understand why people are asking me to invest in data. Now I understand why there's all these folks around analytics that are chirping at me about DMPs and all these other things that I don't get. It's starting to crystallize for me how it all fits together.
Luke Kegel, thank you very much.
Thank you.